Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Eastern Caribbean braces for strong winds and heavy rains from tropical storm Bret. SOEs declared in Westmoreland and St. James. And later in sports, West Indies make it 2 from 2 at World Cup qualifiers. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shamela Pullen. Here are the details. States of public emergencies have been declared in St. James and Westmoreland. The SOEs came into effect midnight June 22 and will remain for an initial period of 15 days. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says in a release that the measure has been implemented in response to a surge in criminal activities in the respective parishes. In making the recommendation, Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson also pointed to a spike in inter and extra gang murders in St. James and Westmoreland. SOEs empower the security forces to carry out targeted operations aimed at disrupting and dismantling criminal gangs while preventing serious crimes. Jamaica could be in trouble if the power imbalance between the executive and the legislature is not addressed with urgency. The view of co-chair of the Advocates Network, Professor Rosalie Hamilton. O'Shane Masters reports.
But if our parliamentarians are to hold the cabinet accountable, as implied in Section 69, then there must be rules in place to enable parliamentarians to access those secrets in case those secrets are a problem for the nation.
Professor Rosalia Hamilton speaking on the morning agenda on Power 106. She noted that there are many documents examined by Cabinet which are held in secrecy. But the professor warned that in the quest for accountability, the legislature must have access to those documents as well.
I make the point to say it boils down to that. What we have seen for the past 60 years is executive sovereignty. We've shifted from the power of the monarch to the power of the executive. And unless there is adequate oversight of the executive, we will continue to see the problems that we have.
A point which has gained favor with Executive Director of Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, JAMP, Jeanette Calder.
So I believe in the strategic objectives, the same thing that Rosalia said about the way in which we're governed. It's top secret. It has to become more open, and it needs to be reflected in the job description. In the strategic objectives, it needs to say we ensure and assure that the parliamentarians will consult and to come up with a phrase that acknowledges that this is the time and the space we're living in now, and it's a right that the citizens of the people of Jamaica must have, not just CSOs and civil society organizations.
In the meantime, Ms. Calder is urging the government to move ahead with legislation in which the Prime Minister can be impeached and MPs be recalled. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
Prison sentences should be used as a last resort when dealing with child offenders. That's according to President of the Jamaica Bar Association's President Alexander Williams, who was speaking on TVJ's Smile Jamaica today. More in this report.
Earlier this week, the Joint Select Committee met to review the Offences Against the Person Act and the Child Care and Protection Act. UNICEF Child Justice Specialist Shelley Casey says the imposition of mandatory sentences for child offenders will put Jamaica in breach of international practices. President of the Jamaica Bar Association, Alexander Williams, weighs in on the issue, agreeing with UNICEF's position.
Section 13 of the Constitution, which says that we should not impose cruel and inhuman punishment. So if you're talking about a child, it may be cruel and inhuman, a mandatory minimum of 20 years in a particular instance. Not saying in all instances, but there may be an instance in which it might be cruel and inhuman.
Yeah.
So we don't think mandatory minimum sentences, particularly when you're dealing with child care and protection, would be appropriate.
A child offender would be children 12 years and under 18 years. Mr. Williams also said a child who is under 12 years by law cannot commit a crime.
So the 11-year-old will have to be treated in a different way. Intervention will have to happen, and all the other types of processes that are available to a child of those years, which will ultimately result in rehabilitation and so on. But for the purposes of the criminal law, you cannot prosecute a child under 12 years of age. That's the position.
Didn't know that.
And we can get into why that is, for the obvious reason.
And so a more flexible rather than strict and rigid punishment is what's recommended when dealing with offending juveniles. In addition, Mr. Williams said the longer a child stays locked up in prison, the greater the possibility of him or her becoming a hardened criminal, which will make matters worse.
Think about the environment of a child, about being separated from any other family that might give you the kind of support that may have become available since incarceration and so on. So you have to be very careful and balanced in how you treat children. Don't take away the need to be that care and balance by imposing a mandatory minimum across the board.
Carrie Simpson for TVJ News.
Tropical storm Bret may not be a threat to Jamaica at this time, but in the Eastern Caribbean, citizens are bracing for a period of strong winds and heavy rains. According to the latest forecast, Bret is packing near hurricane-force sustained winds of 70 miles per hour. Its center could cross or come quite close to St. Lucia or Martinique on Thursday night. We're now joined live by Riani Isadori from St. Lucia. Thanks for joining us. In light of the forecast, has the country begun experiencing the effects of Bret?
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. As of 1 p.m. Eastern time, St. Lucian time, I think you guys are an hour behind. It's 12 p.m. over there in Jamaica. But as of now, this moment in St. Lucia, commercial and public sector activity has effectively shut down in anticipation for the impending passage of Tropical Storm Bret. And according to the latest forecast, the 12 p.m. forecast, the storm is still some ways out. The effects, St. Lucia won't begin to experience the effects of Bret not until later on this evening from about 8 or 9 p.m. East Caribbean time. So right now it's virtually the proverbial calm before the storm. Commuters, the general public would now be making their way homes after stocking up on grocery supplies and the essentials ahead of tonight's likely impact.
Randy, how has St. Lucia been preparing though?
Right. Well, at the governmental level, we just concluded, or the government has what is known as the National Emergency Management Authority, NEMAC. All right. It consists of private and public sector leaders and organizations. 2 pre-strike meetings were convened, one yesterday and the second and final concluded just this morning. The intention, the purpose behind this gathering of the NEMAC is to take stock and updates from the relevant agencies on the state of readiness for some of the critical infrastructures and critical government services, such as the Ministries of Health, the hospitals, the Ministry of Infrastructure would have given updates in relation to the status of drain.
That's all the time we have. Please be safe and thanks for joining us. We take a break. Stay with us, more stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. The Ministry of Labour and Social Security is taking steps to improve the overseas employment program for farm workers. Speaking at Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing, Colonel Charles Jr. says meetings have been held with Canadian officials to see how the issues can be addressed. Other stakeholders will also be engaged.
The role of the Canadian Program Management Committee, which currently has oversight responsibility for the operation of the program to ensure that the liaison services is performed optimally, has been refocused. We have also engaged the committee and other members of the ministry to define steps going forward so we have a more robust and effective approach. Letters are being prepared to send to all farm workers to assure them of our continued support.
And Mr. Charles says the Ministry of Labour is working to improve how it communicates with persons on the farm work program. He says the ministry is in the process of re-establishing a toll-free line for the farmers to reach out to them without any hassle,
which will be supported now by additional mechanisms for farmers, farm workers to contact us without feeling any concern of victimization and being able to express themselves through email address and WhatsApp number and whatever different ways we have available for them to directly contact us to express their concerns discreetly. And so that information will be sent out to all farm workers shortly.
A team from the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce will be hitting the road soon as part of plans to improve micro, small and medium-sized enterprises across the island. Senator Aubin Hill made the announcement at Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing. It's estimated that MSMEs account for 80% of jobs in the Jamaican economy. But Mr. Hill says there are several areas which they need to develop on in order to maximize capacity.
EB and us have agreed to do a roadshow for MSMEs. The first one is going to be in July, I think July 21st, 27th in Mandeville. Then we're going to come back to Kingston. Then we're going to go to Montego Bay and Ocho Rios, taking it on the show because why? Many MSMEs, I run NCB, many of them don't want to come into the bank. Some of them afraid to come in the bank. So we're taking the show to them. The IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, Jamaica's largest and really most magnanimous lending partner, has agreed to give us a grant of $250,000.
It's time for the Business Minute.
Jamaica could soon see the establishment of an export academy to help bolster Jamaica's export capacity. The platform will be a free online service provided by the government through the Trade Board Limited, TBL. Trade Administrator and TBL Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Major Retired Hugh Blake, says the academy will reduce the uncertainty about how to export and give businesses the tools and confidence to seek out export opportunities globally. Regarding the platform's operation, Dr. Blake explained that exporters will complete an online questionnaire that is analyzed by standard programming to identify knowledge gaps, after which the information will be used to customize a training program for that particular company or individual. Further afield, the Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates for a 13th consecutive time later as it tries to tackle rising prices. Official data on Wednesday showed that inflation, the annual rate at which prices go up, was stuck at 8.7% in May. That has made it more likely for the bank to announce a rise in its benchmark rate from 4.5%. Now, interest rates remain its primary tool to lower inflation, despite debate over its effectiveness. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm O'Shane Masters.
Time now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, St. Kitts and Nevis has moved one step closer to becoming one of the most marijuana-friendly places in the Caribbean as parliamentarians approved 4 bills regarding its use and possession. The Smoking Designated Areas Bill 2023, Drugs Prevention and Abatement of the Misuse and Abuse of Drugs Amendment Bill 2023, the Rastafari Rights Recognition Bill 2023, and the Freedom of Conscience Cannabis Bill 2023 were unanimously approved by members of Parliament during yesterday's National Assembly sitting. The Smoking Designated Areas Bill 2023 identifies specified public places as smoking areas, prohibits smoking outside of a designated area in public places to better provide for protection from exposure to certain types of smoke and for related or incidental matter. And international stories, I'm Carrie Simpson.
Thank you, Carrie. And we head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have your Midday Sports Report with Karen Madden.